Hola a todos, espero que ustedes se encuentren bien. Today we are going to review the CSEC Spanish January 2025 paper 2. Okay, so let's share my screen and get right into it. All right, so section 1. As you know, the directed situations, and let's go. So your youth group, your youth group leader is starting a community project. Write the Instagram message that he or she posts, giving 2 details about the project. So you have to give 2 details about this community project. So what are my 2 details? Vamos a limpiar las calles los fines de semana. So we are going to clean up the streets on weekends. So I've provided 2 pieces of information. The first piece of information is going to be what the community project is, the activity that the community project is based on, and when it will be carried out. So the activity as well as the time, the time. Okay. B, your mother is looking for someone to help with the housework. Write the announcement you placed in the newspaper giving 2 details about the job. Okay, 2 details. Necesitamos ayuda con la limpieza de la casa 2 días a la semana. What were my 2 details? So my 2 details were the specific job as well as the frequency of that job. Okay? So the job is going to be limpieza, so the cleaning of the house, de la casa, and 2 días a la semana, twice a week. So that's how often. C, your friend has hurt your feelings. Write the text message mentioning what he or she did and how he or she can make up for it. Once again, 2 pieces of information. The first piece of information is going to be what he or she did. So, of course, you have to use the past tense. Me insultaste. You insulted me. And how he or she can make up for it. Pero puedes disculparte. So, you insulted me, but you can apologize. So, the apology is going to be the way in which he or she can make up for the wrongdoing. D, your father wants to meet your teacher. Write the note that he sends to the teacher requesting the meeting and mentioning what he wishes to discuss. So you have to request the meeting and then mention what the meeting will be about. So, me gustaría organizar, or I could have said quisiera organizar una reunión con usted. Well, the relationship between a father and a teacher it could be familiar, but to be on the safe side, and plus it is a person in authority. Well, yes, in authority, so usted would be the best choice. Okay? Me gustaría organizar una reunión con usted para hablar de las notas de mi hijo. So I would like to organize a meeting with you to talk about my son's grades. So that's the topic of discussion. Para hablar de las notas de mi hijo. E, write the review of a movie that you and your aunt have just seen. Mention one thing that you liked and one thing that you did not like about it. So, one thing that you liked, you could say, me gustó la acción. This is past tense, of course. Pero no me gustó el final. So, I liked the action, but I did not like the ending. So, the one thing that I liked would have been the action, but the one thing that I did not like would have been the ending. F, your neighbor has just celebrated a special occasion. Write the congratulatory message your family sends mentioning the occasion. So you have to first congratulate them. Felicitaciones, that's one way. You could also say, of course, enhorabuena or felicidades, but you have to mention what you have to mention the occasion. So what are you congratulating the neighbor? So this is the specific occasion. Felicidades por el matrimonio. So por followed by the celebration or occasion. So congratulations on the marriage. Muy bien. G, you have just received disappointing news of your performance in an athletic competition. Write the text that your coach sends suggesting how you can improve and offering help. So you need two details. So you need to make a suggestion and then offer help. So necesitas ser más paciente. You need to be more patient. Y te ayudaré con eso. And I will help you with that. So the suggestion is you need to be more patient and and I later or subsequently offer my assistance. Te ayudaré con eso. H, your class has been asked to provide their opinion on online learning. Write your submission stating one advantage and one disadvantage. Okay? One advantage, one disadvantage. And you don't necessarily have to say, well, una ventaja es, because it's going to be obvious based on what you say, which one is an advantage and which one is a disadvantage. Okay? So I started with the advantage. No necesitas usar gasolina. You do not need to use gasoline. So obviously that is a advantage of using online learning. So obviously now I have to talk about a disadvantage. Y la clase termina, or I could have even said pero, but la clase termina si la conexión a la internet falla. And the class ends if if the connection to the internet fails, or if the internet connection fails. So that's obviously a disadvantage. I, you visit your favorite store and see a sign with some disappointing news and an explanation. Write the sign. Okay, what is this? What did the sign actually say? Estamos cerrados hoy. So we are closed today. And then the explanation. ¿Por qué hubo un robo ayer? Because there was a robbery yesterday. So that would have been the disappointing news. Well, that would have been the explanation, yeah. And J, your Minister of Tourism wants to promote your country. Write the message he or she writes on social media, giving two reasons why a tourist should visit your country. So you just have to say two good things about your country, basically. So I said, tenemos playas muy bonitas. We have very beautiful beaches. Y nuestra gente es amable. And our people are friendly. And as you know, in Spanish, the word for people is gente, even though it is plural in concept, in terms of morphologically or in word form, it is singular, right? So nuestra gente es amable. Our people are friendly. All right, so that concludes the situations. Now we proceed to the letter. So what is the specific scenario here? Your class visited a Spanish-speaking country recently, but you were unable to go. Write the letter you sent to your Venezuelan friend in which you include 1. Details about the trip, when, where, why. 2. The reasons you could not go on the trip and your reaction. 3. How students can benefit from the trip. 4. What you plan to do to ensure that you go next year. Okay, so we have all of the cues laid out for us. Now we go to write our letter, but of course I've already written it. So of course we start with the date in the right hand corner. Simple, day of the week, followed by the date. So jueves 16 de abril de 2026. Uh, so I start with a salutation. Querida Mariana. So Mariana is my Venezuelan friend. Did it say Venezuelan, right? So she is my Venezuelan friend. Of course, we start off with a greeting. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hello, how are you? Espero que tú y tu familia estén bien. So I hope that you and your family are well. Are well. Now I introduce the purpose of the letter. Te escribo para contarte sobre un viaje que perdí. So I am writing you to tell you about a trip that I missed. Mi clase de español visitó Panamá la semana pasada para aprender español. Y no fui porque tenía 2 exámenes privados. So my Spanish class visited Panama Panama last week to learn Spanish, and I did not go because I had 2 private exams. So that responds to the first cue, in which it talks about when. So when is going to be last week. Where, obviously, to Panama, and the why is going to be to learn Spanish, para aprender español. So we have responded to the first cue, which would have comprised details of the trip. So the next thing we need to get into would be the reasons that I could not go on the trip and my reaction. So me decepcioné. Okay, no, sorry. I already mentioned why I could not go, why I didn't go, because I said I had 2 private exams. No fui porque tenía 2 exámenes privados. So I did not go because I had 2 private exams. So those 2 private exams represent the reasons that I could not go on the trip, right? What was my reaction? Me decepcioné. I became disappointed, or I was disappointed, from the verb decepcionarse. Cuando supe que mis exámenes sucederían durante la visita. So I was disappointed when I found out that my exams would occur during the visit. So that would represent my reaction. All right. So we go to the third cue, how students can benefit from the trip. Siempre he querido visitar Panamá porque me dicen que es un lugar bonito con tantas atracciones. So this does not really respond directly to the cue, but it still provides some more some relevant details. I have always wanted to visit Panama because they tell me that it is a beautiful place with so many attractions. De hecho, mi hermana fue a Panamá el año pasado y me dijo que lo pasó muy bien. In fact, my sister went to Panama last year and she told me that she had a good time. So once again, those are details that may not be directly relevant, but they're still, useful for creating words or making up the word count, right? Now we directly address the third cue from creo. So creo que este viaje fue importante porque los alumnos obtuvieron la oportunidad de practicar su español y aprender sobre la cultura panameña. So I believe that this trip was important because students obtained the opportunity to practice their Spanish and learn about Panamanian culture. So two objectives with one action, right? So in Spanish, the expression for that is matar dos pájaros de un tiro. So killing two birds with one stone. Muy bien. So that was the importance of the trip. So students could or were able to practice their Spanish and learn about Panamanian culture, okay? So what they say after? Siempre es mejor aprender español dentro de un país hispanohablante. It is always better to learn Spanish within a Spanish-speaking country. All right, so that's still related to the importance of the trip or how students can benefit. So my conclusion, which is going to be what you plan to do to ensure that you go next year. So what did I say? Ya pasé los dos exámenes, así que viajaré a Panamá con la clase el año próximo. So I already passed the two exams, so I will travel to Panama with the class next year. So that obviously would explain, or that would explain my plans to ensure that I can go next year. And I continue. No voy a hacer ningún examen, así que estaré disponible. So that's more explanation. I am not going to do any exam, so I will be available. Okay? Escríbeme pronto. Write me soon. Besos, Pablo. Kisses, Pablo. And the word count, 145. So within the limit. Muy bien. That is section 2. So we go on to section 3, the contextual dialogue. So what is the situation here? Well, at school, you and your classmate, Luisa, are discussing an upcoming visit by the youth swim team. 1. Okay, responses to all of the cues listed below must be included in the completed dialogue. 1. Feelings about the upcoming visit by the youth swim team. 2. Information about their resources and who you admire. 3. Concerns about the upcoming competition between both teams. 4. Discussion on ways to exchange contact information with the team. And 5. Exchange of goodbyes. Okay, so Luisa, estoy tan emocionada. El equipo de natación argentino llegará al aeropuerto dentro de 2 días. ¿Cómo te sientes? So what does this state? What does this state? I'm very excited. The national Argentine swimming team will arrive at the airport within 2 days. How do you feel? Right? So in order to know what I am to say, it is imperative that I look to see what Luisa says afterward. So Luisa says, I apologize if you can hear a truck because a garbage truck has just passed, but hopefully you were unable to hear it. So, no sé mucho de ellos, excepto que leí que hay 2 muchachas del equipo que llaman tiburones a causa de su velocidad en el agua. So, Luisa says, I do not know much about them, except that I read that there are 2 girls. There are 2 girls from the team that they call sharks due to their speed in the water. Pero, ¿qué sabes de lo que han ganado? But what do you know about what they have won? So based on Luisa's response, our first response has to be inquiring about the team as far as what she knows because she responds, no sé mucho de ellos. So she says, I do not know much about them. So you have to ask her, what do you know about the team? Of course, you have to respond to the first question, which is, ¿Cómo te sientes? So I said, estoy emocionado también. I'm also excited. And my next part was, what do you know? ¿Qué sabes del equipo? So if a question is there, that means if I have put a question there, that means that in the dialogue there were question marks, which means that a question was mandatory. So you had to respond to the question, ¿Cómo te sientes? And then you had to formulate a question to inquire about the team because she responds, no sé mucho de ellos, right? So, ¿qué sabes del equipo? So, continuing, the last part, she asks, ¿Qué sabes de lo que han ganado? What do you know about what they have won? So, in order to know what I have to say, I have to read ahead. So, Luisa says, tantas medallas y en tantas competencias. Dime más de este sitio web. ¿Y quién es tu nadador favorito del equipo? So many medals in so many competitions. Tell me more about this website and who is your favorite swimmer from the team, right? Now, in a case like this, you obviously have to talk about the medals that they have won because she says tantas medallas, so many medals. So I proceeded to say, ellos han ganado 15 medallas en 5 competencias. So, I mean, you could play around with the number. You could play around with the number. So I said they have won 15 medals in 5 competitions. Um, and then she says afterwards, dime más de este sitio web. So you had to talk about a website. So I said, puedes echar un vistazo al sitio web. So you can take a look or you can have a look at the website. Right. So you had to mention a website because that's what she says afterwards. And then she asks, ¿Quién es tu nadador favorito del equipo? So who's your favorite swimmer? So we look down. What did she say afterwards? Sí, es mi favorito también y es por la misma razón. So she said, yes, he or she is my favorite as well. Well, he is my favorite as well. Y es por la misma razón. So it's for the same reason. So the first part of your answer has to talk about, well, you have to respond to the first part, which is going to be, tell me more about the website, right? So I said, tiene todos sus premios, which is, it has all of their awards. And then you answer who's your favorite, and you answer or you provide your favorite swimmers. Y mi nadador favorito es Miguel por su fuerza. So you obviously had to give a reason because afterwards she says es por la misma razón and for the same reason. Right? So you both agree that he is your favorite for the same reason. Okay. So continuing. ¿Qué responsabilidades tienes para la visita de este equipo? So what responsibilities do you have for the team's visit or the visit of this team? So what does Luisa say afterwards? Yo también tengo estas responsabilidades. So I also have these responsibilities. Obviously, you have to mention what the responsibilities are. Okay? Pero, ¿cómo te sientes sobre la competencia entre este equipo y el nuestro? So that's more the second part. So, but how do you feel about the competition between this team and ours? So obviously, we have to talk about the responsibilities. What are they? Tengo que darle la bienvenida. I have to welcome, well, in this case, them, but le refers to equipo, which is team. So I put le. Y informarle sobre nuestro país. So I have to welcome them and inform them about our country. So those are the responsibilities. you would have had to mention at least two because it is clearly plural, right? So Louisa says she also has those responsibilities. But to address the second part, how do you feel about the competition between this team and ours? So what does she say afterwards? She says, no te preocupes por esto. Do not worry about this. Nosotros también tenemos nadadores rápidos como los tiburones. We also have fast swimmers like the sharks, right? So obviously you had to talk about the fast swimmers. You express concern because they have fast swimmers, right? So I said, estoy un poco preocupado. I'm a bit worried porque sus nadadores son muy rápidos because their swimmers are very fast. Mhm. All right, continuing. After she says that we also have fast swimmers like sharks, you have to look down again to see what she says. No, no tengo ninguna información de contacto. So, no, I do not have any contact information. ¿Cómo crees que podemos comunicarnos con ellos? How do you think that we can communicate with them or contact them? So obviously, I have to ask a question, and there were question marks, so a question was mandatory. So you have to ask her if she has any contact information because obviously she says, no, no tengo ninguna información de contacto. So, ¿tienes alguna información de contacto? Mhm. So that will respond to that part. And after she asks, what do you think, or how do you think that we should, communicate with them? You have to look down and what did she say? Esas son excelentes sugerencias. So those are excellent suggestions. Obviously, you have to then suggest how they can get in touch with the team. So obviously, we talked about the existence of a website. So that's one way. Podemos buscarlo en las redes sociales, so we can look for them or search for them on social media. O mandarle un correo electrónico al entrenador, or sending the coach an email, right? Sé que está disponible en el sitio web. I know that it is available on the website. Mhm. So those are the two suggestions when it comes to getting in touch with the team. Yeah? Muy bien, muy bien. All right. So yes, after she says that they're good suggestions, she says, espero que termines todos tus deberes rápido esta tarde. I hope that you finish all your homework quickly this evening. Mañana será un día muy duro. Tomorrow will be a very hard day, or you could say difficult day. And what do I say? To figure out what I say, I have to look at the last line. Entonces te veo mañana. So I basically have to bid her farewell or say goodbye. So I just said, es verdad, it's true. Muchas gracias. Y of course, muchas gracias because she hoped that I finish my homework, quickly. So muchas gracias y hasta mañana. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow. And of course, she ends off by saying, entonces te veo mañana. So I'll see you tomorrow. All right, and my word count was 88. Yeah. So the last section, the reading comprehension passage. So what is the story? This is a story entitled A Visit to the Countryside. Mis amigas y yo decidimos visitar el campo donde vive nuestra amiga Sara. Ella vive en una parte remota del país, desconocida para nosotras, pero que siempre quisimos visitar. Durante el viaje, Hablamos de lo que esperábamos experimentar allá y lo que haríamos durante nuestra estancia. Cuando llegamos, nuestra amiga nos dio la bienvenida con un rico banquete de comida y bebidas. Después fuimos de paseo por los alrededores de su casa y probando diferentes tipos de frutas de su enorme huerta. Pasamos la noche en la sala de estar, algunas en sofás y otras en colchones, en el suelo. No dormimos hasta la madrugada porque teníamos tanto que hablar. Conversamos de nuestros días escolares, de nuestras vidas después de salir del colegio y los planes que tenemos para reunirnos en el futuro. Al despertarnos, nos esperaba un desayuno enorme. Pasamos el resto del día sentadas alrededor de una mesa grande en el patio, planeando la próxima visita. Finalmente, agradecimos a nuestra amiga una visita inolvidable y salimos con los ojos llenos de lágrimas. Mhm. All right. So, of course, you have to respond in English. What two things are said about where Sarah or Sarah lives? So, at the beginning, it says, ella vive en una parte remota del país. So, she lives in a remote part of the country, and it is worth 2 marks. So, there was another detail that was mentioned. Desconocida para nosotras. So desconocida para nosotras means it was unfamiliar to them. It was unfamiliar. So that's the second part, and it is not familiar to her. Right. So she lives in a remote part of the country, and it is not familiar to her friends. B, what did the narrator and her friends do during the journey? Durante el viaje, hablamos de lo que hablamos de lo que esperábamos experimentar allá. So that's the first part. So during the journey or the trip, they spoke about what they were expecting to experience there. So that's the first part. They talked about what they expected to experience there. And the next part, y lo que haríamos durante nuestra estancia, and what we would do during our stay. So they talked about what they expected to experience there and what they would do during their stay. See, how were the narrator and her friends greeted when they arrived? So, cuando llegamos, when we arrived, nuestra amiga nos dio la bienvenida con un rico banquete de comida y bebidas. When we arrived, our friend gave us or welcomed us with a delicious, you can even say rich, delicious feast of food and drinks. So that's what banquete is, feast. So they were welcomed with a feast of food and drinks. D, what did the narrator and her friends do afterwards? Okay. Después fuimos de paseo por los alrededores de su casa. So afterwards, we went for a walk around, or we could say we walked around the outskirts of the house, los alrededores. Y probando diferentes tipos de frutas de su enorme huerta. And they tried different types of fruits from her enormous garden. So huerta is like jardín, so that's garden, right? So those were the two things that they did. They went for a walk around the outskirts of the house, and they tried different types of fruits. Okay, E. What sleeping accommodations were made? It says, pasamos la noche en la sala de estar. So we spent the night in the living room. Algunas en sofás, some on sofas, y otras en colchones en el suelo, and others on mattresses on the ground, right? Or on the floor. So those were the accommodations because it was worth how many marks? Two? Okay. So some spent the night in the living room, others slept on the sofas, and the others slept on mattresses on the floor. So those were the sleeping accommodations made. Mhm. F, when did the narrator and her friends fall asleep that night? So it says here, no dormimos hasta la madrugada porque teníamos tanto que hablar. So we did not sleep until dawn or early morning or the wee hours of the morning because we had so much to talk about, right? They had so much to talk about. So that's the reason that the narrator and her friends fell asleep that are so late. So they fell asleep in the early hours of the following morning, la madrugada, right? Which is early morning. All right, G, what are two things that the narrator and her friends discussed during the night? So what did it say? It said two things, so we only need two. Conversamos de nuestros días escolares, so that's one option. They spoke about their school days, de nuestras vidas después de salir del colegio, our lives after leaving secondary school, y los planes que tenemos para reunirnos en el futuro, and plans to meet up in the future. So any two of those would have worked. So I had what did I put? They spoke about their future plans to meet up. Wait, what am I? Oh, they spoke about their plans to meet up in the future and their school days. And the other option would have been to talk about what they would do after leaving secondary school, right? So any two of those would have worked. Yeah. All right. H, what greeted the narrator and her friends when they awakened? So, al despertarnos, upon waking, nos esperaba un desayuno enorme. So that was what awaited them, a, an enormous breakfast. Un desayuno enorme. Okay. How did the narrator and her friends spend the rest of the day? So it says, pasamos el resto del día sentadas alrededor de una mesa grande en el patio, planeando la próxima visita. So they spent the rest of the day seated or sitting around a big table in the patio or yard, planning their next visit or planning the next visit. So they sat around a big table in the patio and planned their next visit. So that's how they spent the rest of the day. All right. And Jay, how did the narrator and her friends feel on leaving? Explain. So what did it say? Finalmente agradecimos a nuestra amiga una visita inolvidable. So finally, or in the end, we thanked our friend for an unforgettable visit y salimos con los ojos llenos de lágrimas. And we left with our eyes filled with tears. So obviously, if they're filled with tears, that means that they were sad because they had to leave. So the last one says, how did they feel? So they cried because their eyes were filled with tears. They cried when they left, which indicated that they had a wonderful time and they would never forget the experience. As she said, una visita inolvidable, an unforgettable visit. All right, so this brings us to the end of this paper. Espero que ustedes hayan disfrutado de este video. Muchas gracias por ver y hasta la próxima.